Hi, I'm Allen Kanerva from Inspyrd. My expertise is in helping people overcome trauma. And every Wednesday at 12 o'clock, I'm going to host an Ask Me Anything session for about 30 minutes. I'm going to start every session with sharing some of my ideas about trauma and how people can heal. And then I'm going to open the floor. Now, you might be a person who knows somebody who's traumatized. Most of us do. The bigger problem is those people who have trauma are in a system that believes trauma is difficult, if not impossible, to heal. And now you and I both know that when a person's traumatized, they're not doing what they're meant to do. And they suffer, their families suffer, and the communities they live in suffer. And so I've been fortunate enough to live and experience a world in which trauma is an injury that can heal. And the current research demonstrates that. And so I want you to imagine that somebody you know, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, can actually heal their trauma easily and effortlessly. And I'd like a commitment from you. If you're going to come and attend these Wednesday AMAs, come here with an open mind to the possibility of living trauma-free. Come here with an open mind to think trauma is not a disorder. The disorder, PTSD, or any of the other 9, 10, 12 different disorders that can emerge from unresolved trauma are different than the actual injury of trauma. And we know that injuries heal. I've cut myself many times as a young person in the course of my military career, camping, doing stuff, and all the cuts healed. I've broken my collarbone, my arm, my tibia and fibula. They all healed because they're injuries. Now, I believe the human body and the human spirit and the human mind has this innate, magnificent ability to heal. And over the upcoming weeks, I'm going to share more and more information and data on why that's true. So today I'm going to introduce a concept that I call the 7 T's of trauma. It's a framework. It's a framework that I have adopted to make sense of trauma, to make sense of what has to happen to heal from trauma, and then to celebrate triumph over trauma. So there's 7 T's of trauma. I'm going to talk about the first 2 today. And then next week, I'll talk about items 3 and 4. The week after that, I'll talk about items 5 and 6. And in the 4th week, I'll talk about number 7, triumph. And I'll share tens, hundreds, if I could, examples of people who have triumphed over trauma. So let me start today by talking about the tragedy. Number 1 is the tragedy. Tragedy is what happens when a person gets traumatized. Imagine for a moment that in our life, we have all sorts of negative or bad things that happen to us, but they're just part of the normal course of life. Now, we also have a whole bunch of things that happen to us that are good or neutral, and that's just part of the normal course of life. So imagine for a moment that we have all these normal, average, good things that we do, and then we win the lottery. Well, that's an abnormal good. Now, if an abnormal good thing happens to me, I'm going to behave differently. Absolutely 100%. And when something that's abnormal bad happens to us, like a trauma, we behave differently. It just makes sense. So a tragedy is an abnormal bad thing that happens to us. And tragedies come in 2 forms. Now, I like to lean on subject matter experts. So this concept comes from Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps Score, and Gabor Mate, who wrote the book When the Body Says No. And they talk about small t and big T traumas. Now, small t's are those negative events in life that just happen to all of us, and they include adverse childhood experiences. And Bessel van der Kolk will say that most small t traumas happen when we're pre-verbal, so before 2 years old. And Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate will say the bulk of all your traumas happen before you're 7. And that's a very critical age, a very critical period, right? But we can talk about that down the road. Big T traumas are those, big T tragedies are those events, episodal events, a car accident, the loss of a family member to suicide or something else. If you're in the line of duty in the military, it could be an IED. These are episodes, a cancer diagnosis, something like that, a huge episode. So we have small t and big T tragedies. The tragedies also take, from my perspective, one of 3 forms. And they're very, very interesting. The obvious one is when bad things happen to you, when bad things happen to me. Those tragedies impact us very, very significantly. And again, they can take a wide range. Somebody could be assaulted in a park. You could be attacked. You could have your car hit. All sorts of things fall in the realm of something happening to me. The second form of tragedy is what we do to others. Now imagine you're driving and a person steps off the curb and you hit them with your car in a crosswalk. That's could be very, very traumatizing, of course, to the person who was hit by the car, but also to the driver of the car. I had a client, in fact, who that very thing happened to them, and they were referred to me from victim services. They could barely drive their car. They were, I would argue, they were at a risk because they were so hyper-vigilant, hyper-aware, unable to make decisions in the car. And we released that traumatic event for her, and she's back driving, back to life, back to what I would call normal. So things can happen to us. We can do things to others. Now that's also in the realm of military, police, who have to sometimes do things to others in the line of duty. It may actually be the realm of moral injuries, when I have to do something to others that is so egregious, that is traumatizing to me, and it violates my sense of morality, but because of the work I do it in the line of duty. The third way tragedy occurs and that we become traumatized is really interesting. Now, MIT did a study on this, and they said this is the most traumatizing form of a tragedy to a person. And it goes like this. We witness something happening to somebody else that we're either unable to intervene or we choose not to intervene. So, unable to intervene or choose not to intervene. And when they studied that, this witnessing of something bad happening to someone else, that we're unable to intervene, so we're helpless, and we're filled with the fear watching it happen to them, is more traumatizing than if that happened to us directly. So again, quick recap. When we talk about tragedy, there's 2 forms of tragedy that result in being traumatized. There are small t traumas and there are big T traumas. And the small t traumas, by and large, according to experts like Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, happen before we're 7 years old. And again, Bessel would say they happen before we're 2 years old. Big T traumas, the episodal traumas, can happen at any age, anytime, anywhere, right? And then the 3 ways those tragedies impact us, they could be directly. Something bad happens to us, we do something bad to somebody else, or we witness something bad happening to another human being. So the second T I'd like to talk about is theft. Trauma is a thief. Trauma is a thief. It'll steal so much from a person. But in the order of what happens, the first thing that trauma does is it steals our ability to sleep. Now, trauma doesn't happen to us, and then it says, I'm not going to let Billy or Susie ever sleep again. In fact, it's just the opposite. Trauma is what happens to us after we've experienced this tragedy. And part of our brain, the part of us called the sympathetic nervous system, gets dialed up, gets initiated, gets alerted. Now, the main controller of this sympathetic nervous system is the amygdala. And the sympathetic nervous system is that part of your autonomic nervous system that provides you the flight, the fight, or the freeze. Now, we've all experienced it. We've been absent-minded. We go to step up a curb. Then part of our mind recognizes the car and we step back. That's the flight, fight, or freeze mechanism. Now, you can give just thousands of examples of that. I'm interested in a layer a little bit deeper. So when that flight, fight, or freeze mechanism kicks in, it kicks in a cascade of chemistry to allow us to run, which is flight, allows us to fight, so lots of power in our big muscles, or it allows us to freeze and stay frozen. All of those three reactions also in research demonstrate a lowering of our IQ in that moment, as if giving us the ability to separate thought from action. We can act without thinking. Right? The converse, the opposite, the flip side of the sympathetic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is called the rest and digest system. So think about it. Flight, fight, freeze, crisis management, rest, digest, live, thrive. All right? The flip side. And it produces a different cascade of chemistry. The cascade of chemistry in the flight, fight, or freeze size includes adrenaline, cortisol, noradrenaline, chemicals that allow us to act at very high levels, at very high intensity. The opposite side of that, the parasympathetic, is a set of chemistry that allow us to regenerate, that is actually anabolic. And they include things like vasopressin and oxytocin, a whole cascade of chemistry for our regeneration. Now, when we're in flight, fight, or freeze, some parts of our body, of our system that are integral to our long-term health are bypassed, sacrificed. This can include part of our digestion. So all the muscle, all the nutrient, everything's going to our brain, our biceps, our thighs, our heart, and our lungs to fight, flight, or freeze. And what we end up doing is minimizing or lowering the amount of blood, oxygen, nutrient going to integral parts of our bodies, but not needed in the moment for survival, our digestive tract. And this is going to become important on our next Wednesday when I talk about torment and torture, physical torture arising from unresolved trauma. How profound is this? The famous stem cell researcher, Bruce Lipton, had a petri dish full of stem cells, which he divided into two petri dishes of identical stem cells. And in one petri dish, he put the chemistry of the sympathetic nervous system. And in the other petri dish, he put the chemistry of the parasympathetic nervous system. So here, flight, fight, or freeze. Here, rest and digest. And over a very brief period of time, the stem cells in flight, fight, or freeze started to perish, while the stem cells in the rest and digest petri dish thrived. They couldn't reproduce, but they thrived. And that led him to the book, The Biology of Belief. So why is this so important? Here we are in flight, fight, or freeze, and we lay down to go to sleep, and our brain is recalling the activities of the day, and we get triggered back into the traumatic response, and we create the cascade of chemistry of flight, fight, or freeze. You cannot fall asleep when that chemistry is in you. Adrenaline, cortisol, norepinephrine, noradrenaline. We need melatonin to trigger our sleep. So we can't fall asleep. Most people, my experience anyways, when we can't fall asleep, we get angry. So we're deeper into the flight, fight, or freeze emotions, producing more chemicals that prevent us from falling asleep. And let's just say out of pure exhaustion, you fall asleep. A traumatized person will wake up 2, 3, or 4 times a night. And they wake up specifically for what Matthew Walker calls the interruption of overnight therapy. Now, overnight therapy happens about every 90 or 100 minutes because in our life, we have a cycle called the ultradian cycle, which is 90 to 100 minutes long. And we get very alert and very sluggish, very alert, very sluggish throughout the 24 hours of the day. And while we sleep, when we're in this very deep part of the cycle, we enter rapid eye movement sleep. And we dream. Dreams are metaphors, and the metaphors allow us to disconnect emotions from the content and context of the memory, so that memory can become a coherent long-term memory. When you have a traumatized memory, that's when the person is woken up in a night terror or nightmare, right there. So they wake up. Now they're awake. Now they're fully stimulated. They can't fall asleep. 20, 30 minutes, they fall asleep again. They'll wake up another 45 minutes later as they go back into a deep sleep. So they wake up 2, 3, 4 times a night. You do that for a couple nights, you're entering into sleep deprivation. Trauma is stealing your sleep. When it steals your sleep, you don't get this overnight therapy. Memories don't leave short-term memory, the hippocampus, and go into long-term memory. And they can actually measure this phenomenon with a process called sleep spindles. So imagine now your short-term memory hasn't emptied out. You start your new day. You wake up and you feel overwhelmed. The first thing that anybody asks you to do triggers you because you're already overwhelmed. You're hyper aware, you're hyper vigilant, you have a hard time concentrating, and now your day is being stolen from you. Right? Your day is being stolen from you. So imagine keeping this up long term. Imagine keeping this up long term, 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, the impact on your life. Now, sleep is the first thing that trauma steals, but unresolved trauma will steal your career. It'll steal your family. It'll steal your self-esteem. And I'm sorry, but all too often, it ends up stealing people's lives. So today we talked about trauma, the tragedy that leads to the traumatic response. We've talked about small t, big T tragedies. We've talked about things happening to us, what we do to others, what we witness happening to others. And I've talked about the things that get taken from us when we're traumatized, not because our body is bad or evil. Our body's trying to protect us. And the mechanism is overreacting, overperforming. And in that overperformance, keeping us in flight, fight, or freeze at high levels or low levels all day long, we are sacrificing integral parts of our body, sacrificing our overnight therapy, and that will lead to mental torment and physical torture, and I'll talk about those next Wednesday. So I'd like to open up the floor. I'd like to go to any questions you might have, and we'll just take it from there. So if you have a question, put it in the comments, and we can go from there. I've got to get somebody to scroll down so I can see the comments. So while we're waiting for people to put anything in the chat, I'd highly, highly encourage you to hit the link on our channel and download the free ebook, The 7 T's of Trauma. It's super informative. You can just download it. It's free. All right. And then if you're interested, if working with people using leading edge neuroscience to help them overcome trauma interests you, we have a certification course. And if you'd like to talk to somebody about that course, you can just hit the link and book a free consultation. And then most importantly, if you believe you're traumatized, or if you believe you know somebody who's traumatized, have them book a free, absolutely complimentary, no charge consultation. And we can refer them to somebody who can help them. So again, if you're watching this on a replay, so if you didn't get a chance to watch this live today and you're watching it on a replay, highly recommend that you download the book. And if you could, tell us where you are. I'm always interested where YouTube, where going live reaches out to. Right? I'm always interested. I've trained people in New Zealand, Australia, Thailand, England, Norway, many countries in Europe, of course, in Canada, United States. And so I'm interested where you're watching this from. So if you could do that, that would be awesome. All right. All right. If there's no other questions in the chat, we'll wrap it up. We'll be doing this every Wednesday at noon, every Wednesday, 50 weeks of the year. I'm going to take 2 weeks off, but 50 weeks of the year, I'll see you here Wednesdays